Hello dear friends, this is your personal English coach Professor DC, and in this video we will be understanding the future perfect tense. On my screen you can see the agenda of my video. It's very simple and self-explanatory. I will start off with defining the future perfect tense. I'll give you the formula of all those sentences that should be in the future perfect tense. I will move on to explain two different scenarios where future perfect tense should be used. I'll give you lots and lots of examples to explain the scenarios better. And finally, I will summarize this concept, and that will help you revise the whole thing. Dear friends, on my channel, I have already uploaded an in-depth explanation of the simple versions of tenses, the simple present, simple past, simple future, and the present perfect tense. I insist you to revise all these tenses first and then come back to the current video. So let's understand this concept before we dive into its usage and examples. This tense is called the future perfect tense. And what is the definition of a tense? Tense is nothing but a time that is represented by a verb form. On my screen, you can see a diagram wherein you see a vertical blue line which represents the current time or the present time. You see two red dots. Each red dot indicates an action or an event or an occurrence. So if we are talking about the future perfect tense, we are talking about expressing an act that is predicted to be finished within a certain span of time in the future. I have changed the formula a little bit, but before moving on to the formula, let's understand this diagram better. Always remember, when we are talking about the future perfect tense, two actions will be in the picture. Action 1, action 2. Both these actions or occurrence or event will be happening in future. Now, all it matters is the sequence of those actions. Action 1 might occur before action 2 or vice versa. Now, to explain this situation while talking or writing, the sentence structure that you should be using is subject plus will plus have plus V3 plus object. Whenever we are referring to future tense, we will always use will or shall. You also have another formula: subject plus am is are plus going to have plus V3. At this point, I know you are concerned about how will you use this formula. How will you make sentences out of these formulas? Don't worry, I'll give you enough and more examples to make sure that you are able to use the formula well. So in all the examples you see, you will see two different structures. One with will and one with be going to form. The very first scenario of the usage of future perfect tense is when you want to talk about an action which is completed before some other action in future. Let's see some examples. By next November, I would have received my promotion. I am not going to have finished this test by 3 o'clock. Will she have learned enough Chinese to communicate before she has moved to Beijing? Sam is probably going to have completed the proposal by the end of this month. By the time I finish this course, I will have taken 10 tests. How many countries are you going to have visited by the time you turn 50? By the time she gets home, he is going to have cleaned the entire house. Jack will have finished his homework by the time his mother finishes cooking. By the time he graduates, he will have completed 5 years of study. She will have prepared dinner by the time he enters the house. The snow will have stopped by April. We will have returned home by 5 o'clock. His wife will have made the dinner by the time he returns. He will have ruined his ears by shouting. He will have ruined her ears by shouting by the time their parents get home. By the time he leaves the bar, he will have drunk a lot. By tomorrow, their life will have changed completely. We are on a vacation, so by the time we get back, we would have we would have rested and relaxed. Her heel will have fully healed by summer. By next month, you will have received your promotion. By the time he wakes up, we will have prepared lunch for everyone. Dear friends, did you notice one thing here? In all these sentences, there are two actions as shown in the figure. Let's take any sentence for example. I am not going to have finished this test by 3 o'clock. Action number 1 is finishing the test, and action number 2 is the striking of the clock, the moment when it is 3 o'clock. Now, the only thing that matters is the sequence of events. You know that you're referring to future, and you know that one action is preceding the other, or the other is preceding the first one. In that case, you have to straight away think about the future perfect tense. You have to straight away recall the formula: subject plus will plus have plus V3 plus object. Subject plus am is are plus going to have plus V3 plus object. The second scenario is when you want to consider a time reference, when you want to express a time of the events that are going to happen in future. For example, I will have been in London for 6 months by the time I leave. Now friends, I want you to focus on the sentence structure and the two actions that are indicated in all these sentences. The person being in London is the first one, and his leaving is the second one. Now all we have to do is rearrange the sequence of events according to how they unfold and use the formula. Let's check out the other example. I will have been here for 6 months in June 23rd. By the time you read this, I will have left. They will have completed the project before the deadline. By Monday, Susan is going to have had my book for a week. He will have returned home by 6 o'clock. By midnight, they will have partied like crazy. By tomorrow, he will have slept well. All his teeth will have come by next year. Tomorrow, he will have been sick for 2 weeks. Next week, she will have already lived 6 months in the country. She will have gotten ready by the time they leave the house. Lily will have cleaned out the apartment before she gives back the rent. By the time I get home, Joe will have cooked dinner for both of us. In September, I will have lived here for 8 years. Luke will have been sick for 2 weeks tomorrow. Next week, you will have had this car for 25 years. He will have played before the season ends. He will have destroyed the book before his parents arrive. So friends, I have given you enough and more examples of the future perfect tense, and by now I hope it is clear to you. Now friends, I want to talk about two different things. All the sentences that we saw here indicated something positive, indicated something affirmative. But there can also be negative sentences in future perfect tense. For example, the film will not have started by the time we get there. So, in such sentences, not will be introduced in between will and have. Another example, I will not have stopped. We will not have stopped. All these examples were for the first formula, S plus will plus have plus V3 plus object. So for the negative sentences, I will just introduce not in between will and have. Yet another type of sentence that adheres to this formula is question. I can ask a question in future perfect tense. What are the examples? Will the film have started by the time we get there? Will I have stopped? Will you have stopped? Will we have stopped? Will they have stopped? And so on. Now let's talk about the second formula and the two types of sentences apart from the affirmative sentence. As I said, the first one is negative. What is the example of the negative sentence of the second formula? The example is, I am not going to have stopped. you are not going to have stopped. She is not going to have stopped. Let's talk about the second type of sentence adhering the second formula. Am I going to have stopped? We are not going to have stopped. Is he going to have stopped? Is it going to have stopped? So on and so forth. Now friends, in all the examples that I gave, the words highlighted are we three. Dear friends, if you are a master of V1, V2, V3, then tenses will be really easy for you. What am I referring to here? If you just go to Google and type V1, V2, V3 list, you will get abundant websites which enlist V1, V2, V3, and this should be your first step before learning any tense. V1 is the base form, V2 is the past simple, V3 is the past participle. Now, what is a participle? If you add something to the verb, like ed or en or anything else, that becomes a participle. In future perfect tense, which verb form did we use? It was V3. So in all my examples, you will never see any verb that was in the simple past. Future perfect means V3. Now you might be thinking, sir, how can I remember this list? Unfortunately, you have to memorize it. Memorize the list, go to your friend or colleague or family and ask them to ask you any verb and its forms. That is the best way to remember. You can also quiz yourself. You can pick a word, write the V1, V2, V3 and come back to the list and check. Friends, not only V1, V2, V3, but then there are regular and irregular verbs. What is a regular verb? If, for example, I pick the word bet, you can see that V2 is also bet, V3 is also bet. So I'm not changing its spelling when I'm changing the form. I'm not changing the structure. I'm not changing the pronunciation. If we have such a word, if we have such a verb, then that verb is called a regular verb because nothing changes when the form changes. What about irregular verbs? Most of the words you see, they change the spelling and pronunciation and structure. For example, let's pick bid, bade, bidden, bid, bade, bidden, beget, begot, begotten, bear, bore, born. So you see the spelling has changed when it changed the form, the pronunciation changed and the structure changed. So such verbs are called irregular verbs. So that's the key. You should be reading a lot of books. You should be reading a lot of magazines, English newspapers, podcasts. I'm very sure. If not, please do that. This is the only way to get introduced to different verb forms. And that is the only way to master and use tenses. Now it's time for a quick summary. The future perfect tense. This tense is used to express an act that is predicted to be finished within a certain span of time in future. The formula is will plus have plus V3, or the second formula can be am is are plus going to have plus V3. The future perfect expresses the idea that something will occur before another action in the future as indicated in my diagram. It can also show that something will happen before a specific time in future. Those are the two very common scenarios for which we saw abundant examples. I'm scrolling through. On my screen you can see different sentences. I want you to go through them very quickly, maybe by pausing the video, and master the usage of future perfect tense. Alright friends, I hope you've understood this concept well. If in case you still have doubts, please feel free to reach me out through the comment section below the video. If in case you have suggestion or feedback or a recommendation on my style of teaching, please let me know so that I can improve and help you out even more. If in case there is another topic or a chapter in literature or a poem in literature that you want me to explain, that you want me to make a video explanation on, yes, I will be very happy to help you. I thank you for watching and I hope you have a wonderful day ahead.